Hello, my name is Alex Sanfilippo, and I am a podcast host and also the founder of podpros.com, which is a software company specifically focused on helping podcasters. We have services like podmatch.com, which helps automatically match podcast guests and hosts together for interviews, and podcastsop.com, which helps podcast hosts release episodes on time without all the stress involved. And today I'm excited to talk to you about how to continuously grow your podcast. Now, I want to quickly mention, I'm talking about this today as a student and product of the podcasting industry myself. I am not the greatest podcaster in the world, and I've come a long way since I first began, but I still got a long way to go. And one of my goals along the way is just to help other people along the way in the journey. So if I can help you take one right step through what I'm going to share today, then that is a win. And what I'm sharing today are the things that I've learned that have helped me continuously grow my podcast. So I'm excited to go ahead and dive into these points today. I've got 5 main things I'm going to share today. I'm going to go ahead and start diving these now. So number 1, the very first thing is to remember your why and avatar. Remember your why and your avatar. Let me quickly explain both those things. What your why is the reason that you're podcasting. Now, let me give you some examples of what a bad why or wrong why is, or why that's just simply not big enough. If your why is to quit your full-time job and make money with your podcast, it's not a big enough why. If it's to make a ton of money, right, to get really rich and have that time freedom through your podcast, that's not a big enough why. And if your why is to become famous or some sort of influencer in the space, that's also not a big enough why. Your why always has to be directed towards serving somebody else. As I always like to say it, is seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit. Those things can come and they can be a byproduct, but it first has to start with you intentionally serving somebody else and doing what you can for them. And the sooner you understand this and develop the proper why for what you're doing, the better. So think about it. You might say, you know what? I want to impact people in a bigger way to experience more health, like physically. I want to help them with their mental health. I want to help them laugh. I want to build a comedy podcast. I want to give them great stories for when they're on the road. Build and develop a big why. And as soon as you do that, create an avatar that actually matches that why. Now, what your avatar is simply your ideal listener. I call it a fictitious listener, but the ideal one. So when you think about your why, if you say that my why is to help early stage entrepreneurs make their first or next step in business the right one, then your avatar needs to be a fictitious character that matches that why really well, so you can compare all future content against that one character. Now, when I developed this character, I actually gave him a name and everything. His name is Adam. I can tell you how old he is, where he works out, where he works, but he's a fictitious character. But the reason was that I did all this is because I want to have what feels like a relationship with him. So every time I'm thinking about bringing on a guest or doing another episode, I can ask myself, would Adam like this? And by asking myself that, I'm actually asking, does it align with the why that I created for this show? Keep your avatar, keep your why in front of you, and I promise you, make sure it's big enough, of course, but I promise you that it will really serve you well to continuously grow your podcast, because you can always circle right back to that. A great resource I have on this is actually a podcast interview that I did with John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire. You can find that at creatingabrand.com/089. And he talked about how to really create your ideal customer avatar or avatar for your podcast. Super insightful conversation. Again, that's at creatingabrand.com/089. And I encourage you to check that out. All right, moving right along here. So now we're at point 2, connect with ideal listeners. You want to connect with the people that are listening to the show. Now, you may be asking me, you're like, Alex, well, how do I actually connect with those people? There's a few ways to do it, but let me tell you the main thing that I found that works. When somebody likes something that you post on social media, or you see them like a few things, send them a message and say, hey, I saw that you like this. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. And if they respond and stuff like that, then just say, hey, would you mind getting on a 10-minute call with me, or maybe like a Zoom or video conference call with me? Or can I ask you a couple questions? Anything you can do to start diving into a relationship with that person, to connect with them, is going to be a win. Or if someone's actually leaving you messages, comments, whatever it might be, right? Like if you actually have that sort of engagement from people, draw into that. Now, here's the important disclaimer. It can't just be anybody. Like if your cousin really likes it, then, and they don't necessarily fit the ideal avatar that you have, they don't match that avatar we just talked about, then what you're going to learn from them isn't going to be super helpful. An example of this is early on my podcast. It's for early stage entrepreneurs, right? I had somebody listening who was actually in corporate sales, and they liked the show, but they had some feedback for it that wasn't right. And the reason I know it wasn't right is because they're not my avatar. So like they had more time in the day than maybe a startup entrepreneur does, who's just like trying to grind it out all day, right? And need to be shorter. That person was telling me to make the episodes longer, but that was not good advice. And I was able to not listen to it. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but because it was my avatar. Like, so I didn't need to listen to that as much. Now, here's the thing. When you connect with an ideal listener, you confirm, you know what, this matches my avatar. They connect with my why. ask them some important questions. You can't just be like, what do you like about the show? What can I do to make it better? Like, those questions are well-meaning, but no one wants to break your heart, especially if they like what you're doing. So you need to find a way to position those questions better. And I have a great resource for this, actually. His name is Rob Fitzpatrick, and I had him on my podcast as well. And you can find that at creatingabrand.com/132. He has a book called The Mom Test. And to put it really simple for you, basically, he's saying that your mom is going to lie to you about your business idea. Like, if you're like, I'm going to make an umbrella, Mom, that doesn't stop the rain. And I think I want to launch this company. Your mom's gonna be like, oh, baby, it's going to be great. You're going to be so successful. Everything you do is going to be good, right? Your mom is lying to you. The reason he calls it the mom test is because he wants you to reframe the questions in such a powerful way that even your mom can't lie to you about how it makes you feel, right? Like, because you take yourself out of the equation. I highly recommend listening to this podcast episode. It's at creatingabrand.com/132, because then when you connect with your ideal listeners, you will ask them such powerful questions as a result. So again, check that out. And again, number 2, connect with ideal listeners. All right, moving on here. Number 3, stay consistent with episode releases. Stay consistent with episode releases. This is so important. You have to make sure that you keep the main thing in podcasting. Now, here's something I noticed that happens in podcasting. When you launch, you look at some of the greats of podcasting, some of the big names in the industry, and you're like, oh man, they've got a good podcast, but look at their social media. Look how polished their website is. Oh, they've got a YouTube channel. Oh, they're getting big on TikTok. Oh, we've all got to get on TikTok now because it can grow your podcast. All those things are not the main thing. Start a podcast to start a podcast, not to start a blog, not to start a YouTube channel, not to write a book, not to build courses. If you want to start a podcast, start the podcast. Keep that main thing the main thing. And what's most important is to stay consistent with those episode releases. Never get to the point where you're like, oh, I was having trouble keeping up with the social content, so I actually couldn't keep on releasing episodes. No, stop the social content. Don't spread yourself too thin. I think this is one of the biggest problems I see in podcasting. And I had a slide with JLD on it earlier. John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire. At one point, I had a conversation with him, and he said, Alex, you have a really good podcast. Do you want to know the difference between my show and your show? Now, at this point, when he was saying that, I probably had a few hundred people listening to my podcast every week, and he had over 1 million or some crazy number like that, right? Like, that was the difference in the sizes of our show. And I was like, yeah, if there's just like one difference between our shows, I absolutely want to know, right? And I'm sure even now you're like, okay, well, what the heck is it? He said 7 years. 7 years is all he said. And like, I kind of sat back and didn't say anything. I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He's like, you have a really good show. The only difference is I've been doing mine 7 years longer, and I have never missed a release that I promised my listeners. He said, stay the course, and you'll be in the same place I am. So for all of us, even when it feels like you're not getting any traction, or maybe you think you need to do more things, don't fall into that temptation. Stay consistent with your episode releases. That is absolutely the most important thing you can do. And as you begin mastering things, add more things to the equation, but not till you can actually get that down really well. Now, I'm not going to self-promote the rest of this episode or like this video I'm doing here, but I do want to quickly mention a resource that I have, and I want to give you 45 days of it for free. You can go to podcastsop.com. It's literally going to help you keep your episode releases on time and accurate. So check that out. You'll get 45 days for free automatically. Podcastsop.com. It's a great resource for staying consistent with your episode releases. All right, number 4. Here we go. Think different with marketing. I love this point, because traditional marketing has always really bothered me. I'm not good at it, and I still wanted to grow my show, but I didn't want to do all the things I saw everyone else doing. So let's go back to the last point. Just because you see somebody else doing something like TikTok, and a lot of people in podcasting these days are saying that's a great way to grow your show, that doesn't mean it's going to be a great way for you to grow your show. Going back to your why and your ideal avatar, are those people on TikTok? Because mine, early stage entrepreneurs trying to make their first or next step in business the right one, they are not playing around on TikTok. They don't have time for that. So me spending my time trying to market there like everyone else is not going to work. Now, when I say think different with marketing, I actually pulled that from a great businessman and entrepreneur, Mike Michalowicz. He's had a huge impact in my life. Many people know him from Profit First, as he has on his shirt in this picture here. I had the opportunity to interview him on the topic of getting different with your marketing. And you can go to creatingabrand.com/130 to check out that episode. Super powerful. I bring that up for this reason, because when you're trying to think different with your marketing, you need to put your own personality into the way you market. Put your own personality into the way that you market. Now, I'll give you an example, and I will give away my number one strategy for marketing right now. You ready? But quick disclaimer, don't go do it yourself unless it actually fits your personality, right? This is not just another tactic. It shouldn't become just another tactic for you to be like, oh, I got to try that because Alex is doing that, it's working. It might not work for you. So for me, I love to read. So when I interview guests on my podcast, I read their whole book before I actually have them on the show. I like to know what's going on with it. I like to ask really specific questions. And then afterwards, I've always enjoyed leaving a review of the book. I don't know. I just feel like if I wrote a book, I want someone to leave a review for me. So I'm like, yeah, I read it. I actually can say something about the book. I'm going to leave a really descriptive review. And that's always been super fun for me. So I read this book from Mike Michalowicz. And again, you should check out that interview. It inspired me to actually try to turn that into a way that I could market. So here's what I did. I went on Amazon where I was leaving reviews already. And instead of just leaving a text review, I left a video review. Look at my background. It's easy to catch the eye on Amazon that doesn't have this color anywhere on it, right? And so when people are scrolling through the reviews, they see a video from me talking about the book, they'll click on it, they'll watch it. But not only do I just talk about the book, I have one slide that shows the link to the episode of where I interviewed that author. Where I'm like, hey, by the way, if you're thinking you want a copy of this book, but you're not quite sure, check out this interview I did. Here's the link, creatingabrand.com/130. I think it'll really encourage you to pick up a copy of the book, and you might get a lot out of the interview as well. When I started doing that, my audience grew by 20%. And I already had a really substantial audience when I started doing that. So it wasn't like 20% wasn't going from like 10 people to 12 or whatever, right? Like it wasn't like a small thing like that. It was like thousands to more thousands is what it was doing. So again, don't go try that yourself unless you know that's going to work for you. But get different with your marketing. Think different with your marketing. Do what you believe is going to work for you. Listen to this interview to get more insights on that. That's with Mike Michalowicz, creatingabrand.com/130. I believe it'll really serve you well. All right, here we go. Fifth and final point, so important. Number 5, be willing to change. Be willing to change. So there's a quote that I really love, and I've always thought about it. Marshall Goldsmith said, what got you here won't get you there. What got you here won't get you there. So if you currently have 100 people listening to your podcast every week, what you did to get yourself from 0 to 100 will not get you from 100 to 200. You have to be willing to change things. And something I've noticed in podcasting is there's nothing that ever really goes viral. Like there's no episode where you're like, oh my gosh, I went from like, 100 downloads per episode, 300 downloads per episode to like 5,000, right? And then back down. It's very rare you see that happen. I guess occasionally a celebrity guest comes on that makes that type of thing spike a little bit, but it's still not even that aggressive like social media is. It's not like that at all. So when I'm saying being willing to change, you have to think, how can I get a spike? Like, how can I make something go viral, but it's really just growing your show really fast? You do that by making a big change and disrupting the market a little bit. Like, what can you do that no one's done before? Are you realizing that your avatar and your why are changing as you grow and develop? Is it time to make that shift? Because when you do, people that are listening are like, oh, shoot, this is different. Like, this is not how it's been. Hey, friends, check this out. This is something new. That's how you get that spike and you make it grow. So I'm going to encourage you, don't wait for the big names in podcasting to make changes. Be the change. Think about how you can continuously improve. Think about how you can disrupt what podcasting is. Stretch the limits of what you're able to do. Really get out there and think differently with what you're doing, not just with your marketing, but also with how you can change things. I believe it'll really help you grow a lot. So something that I have on this topic, because that scares most of us, right? Like you might hear them like, wow, Alex, I'm just kind of sticking with what I'm seeing working for other people, right? I don't really want to rock the boat. I had the opportunity to interview Seth Godin on my podcast. And if you don't listen to anything else that I've talked about, check this one out because I believe this is an absolute game changer. So you can find that at creatingabrand.com/074. creatingabrand.com/074. And what we talked about is this whole concept of being willing to change. And he calls it the practice, which is the title of one of his books. Basically, everything you're doing, if you can visualize what you're doing as a practice, it can help you stay in the mindset of, oh, I can keep on trying things because I'm just trying them. I'm trying them live. I'm shipping it. It's live for the world to see. But I'm still just practicing. And a great example that he gave in the book was actually the example of a lifeguard. So imagine it's your first week being a lifeguard and you're sitting out there at the beach. Just imagine you live like in Jacksonville, Florida, like me, right? Like where you have the ocean right there. And you see somebody out in the water. You're new, but you see someone in the water who falls off their raft and they start drowning. They're like trying to keep above water. You're new, but what are you going to do like in that moment? Are you going to say, you know what? I see that person out there. I see that they're drowning, but the lifeguard station is 2 blocks that way, and there are some really good lifeguards there that could really help this person. Let me go over there and get them. I'll bring them back, and they'll go save that person. No one would ever do that. Even if you're not a good swimmer, not confident at all, you're going to do everything in your power to save somebody else. And that is the way I look at changing the market, disrupting the market, doing something new. It's so important that we have this freedom to be in the practice, as Seth Godin calls it, right? So we can get out there and just try something all the time, knowing that we might not be the best person for the job, but you know what? We are going to do our best to impact that one person's life who needs it most. And I want to end this with a quote here that I think is just really powerful. What we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others echoes into eternity. What we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others echoes into eternity. Make sure, going back to your why, that your why is big enough that you want to serve somebody else. And when you do that, you will be willing to change, because you know what? If that helps one person's life, then it is worth it. For me, I have based my entire life off of this. So making that why wasn't super difficult, but for everyone else, stretch yourself there. For me, like as a Christian follower of Christ, not that I'm trying to push that on anybody, like to love and serve others is what I've built my life on. And I'm telling you, if you can build your podcast on the same principle of serving and loving other people, you are going to do great in this industry. And I believe that that is how you're going to continuously grow your podcast. So I hope this video was really helpful for you and these 5 points really stand out. Hopefully at least one of them was really impactful for you and will help you continue to grow your show. So thanks so much for watching. Looking forward to bringing you all more videos at a later date.